Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is part 2 of my review of the Star Trek Discovery episode Forget Me Not, which I think could have been named Remember Me, but that title was taken by a TNG episode, and so it's a good thing they didn't keep the same exact title, and the meaning is very fitting to what happens in this episode, and I said it's the best episode of Star Trek Discovery ever. But it doesn't mean the whole episode is good. There's a lot of stuff I didn't like. There's a lot of problems. I'm going to nitpick. But the ending of the episode and the whole Trill story was great in my opinion. It's not in everyone's taste maybe, but for me it worked really well. Emotionally, I finally felt something from this show, and so that's why I think those were definitely the best scenes in the entire show. And it elevates the whole episode, and so that's why I might rank it as the highest episode of the whole show, despite all the other problems in it. And the main reason I liked it so much was for the same reasons that I liked movies such as Ghost, the ending when he has to say goodbye to his lover and to go into heaven. And even though, I don't believe in the afterlife and all of that, but when watching a movie about that, I can accept it as a fantasy story, and so I can get into it and to get invested emotionally, and so that movie worked for me. And this episode also reminds me the ending of the TNG episode The Inner Light, when Picard sees all of his family members who died, and they all show up together again, and they say, we'll be part of you now, and we'll live in you, and all of that. We had something very similar to that in the end of this episode. And also, the episode had that element of a tragic ending of a love story, which is always emotional. And there are countless examples of that kind of story, like in Forrest Gump when he finally gets together with the love of his life, but then she dies. And so that's always kind of tragic and emotional stuff. And there was also the TNG episode called The Offspring when they introduced Data's daughter. And the episode made us love her as a character, and then they kill her off in the end, which is very tragic and emotional. But it also was kind of a bittersweet because they said she's an android, so he actually downloaded her memories into his own brain, and so she kind of not really dead, she's now part of him, and so that made it kind of easier in the end. And we have so many examples of stuff like that, and I'm kind of a sucker for those kinds of emotional stuff, and it does work on me if I'm able to get into it, and I was able to. And the way they introduced the character of Adira, who showed up in the previous episode, and I was completely ready to hate on that character because she seemed to be like another example of kind of a Mary Sue, like the best at everything without explanation, a girl genius, kind of like Wesley Crusher, only a girl. And so I was fully ready to hate on her, but because there was a logical explanation of her abilities, that's why it totally disarmed me about being angry about that, because I always say if it makes sense, then I can accept it easily. And so just like Jadzia Dax in Deep Space Nine was so awesome because, she could fight with Klingons easily, she was a brilliant scientist, and she was like a counselor on the station because she had such a long life, so she can give advice to anyone. And so, if not for the thrill element in her, then I would say she's a total Mary Sue because she's a know-it-all about everything. She's a badass with fighting. She's the best counselor, and so she's such an awesome character. And so that would not be logical for her as a young woman to be able to do all those things without explanation, but there was an explanation because she had the memories of multiple other people inside of her, and that makes it more logical if you can accept the science fiction setting and all of that. And so similarly here, I didn't hate Adira after finding out that she carries a Trill, because that explains her abilities, even though in this episode for a moment I was worried because they said she doesn't remember her previous host, and so she said she lost all her memory up until a year ago. And so for a moment I thought, so wait, so you became such a genius in everything without all those memories? And so that again made it annoying. But I presume that she did have all the memories of all the knowledge itself, she just didn't remember all the personalities of her former host. And so it's not as if she didn't have any memory. She obviously knew multiple languages, she knew technology, so she did possess some of the memories of the previous host, and so it's still okay. And if not for that, if not for her being a Trill, I definitely would say, what the hell is this character, a 16-year-old who knows it all already without ever studying? And so that would have been stupid. And even someone said in the comments that I predicted it because I made a video about a year before Star Trek Picard came out, and I was kind of poking fun at The Last Jedi and stuff like that, and I was kind of saying what it would be like, and some of it kind of came true, some similarities were in the actual show, because I said the new star of the show will be a young woman who will be the best at everything, who will become a captain right away after one day in the academy. She'll become a captain right away because she's so good. And then I see this episode and we see this young girl and she's an admiral right away. She says, I'm the admiral. And that was like even more bizarre than what I said in my worst case scenario. So I was completely ready to hate on this character, but then because of the Trill twist, that made it okay. And also, a lot of people complained about the fact, oh, a human cannot be a host, and Riker was dying. Yeah, but it was centuries before, so can't you accept that in a few centuries medical technology developed in such a way that they can't totally prevent all the rejection problems, and so a human would be able to carry a host thanks to the medical assistance, and so that's why I'm totally okay with that. Of course, they could have simply put spots on her and said that she's a Trill, and so problem solved, but I think it's nice to have some twist. It's nice to do something, unusual and to explain that it can be part of the problem, why she's having such problems with the symbiote, because she's not fully compatible in the beginning and she has to overcome that. And so I'm okay with all of this, so I don't mind her being a human, and I really liked her character. She kind of reminds me of the young Winona Ryder in all kinds of movies, and I had kind of a huge crush on Winona when I was a kid. And I really liked a lot of her movies, not just because she's pretty and cute, but because she always played those innocent and vulnerable characters who get into messed up situations and all of that. So she was always very good at playing those kinds of roles, and she could, cry really well and all of that. And so you really felt for her characters in her movies. And so it really reminds me of that. There's a lot of similar elements to that kind of character here. And that's the kind of character I always liked, just like I liked Data's daughter, for the same reasons, because she was kind of innocent, like a small child, and so you kind of feel protective of her, you care for her, and so I felt the same way here with Adira. And by the way, I like the name Adira. It sounds like a Hebrew word, because in Hebrew the word Adir means great, and it's even been used as a name by guys, like there are guys named Adir, and Adira would be like the female version of that, but I never actually heard that name ever, but it kind of feels like a Hebrew name, and I thought the character was cute, like the same way I liked Winona Ryder's character in a lot of movies. I also liked her in the same way, and with the whole love story, some people might find it cringy because of that whole, bisexual and all that stuff, because, her boyfriend is apparently a female who became a man or something, and so there's all those elements that some people might dislike. And also he's now hundreds of years old and yet he's dating a 15-year-old girl, and so that's kind of creepy maybe, but they never show that they have sex or something, so it seemed to be just some innocent love, and so I don't consider that a deal breaker. It didn't prevent me from getting invested into it, and then they had a tragic ending for that character, and that kind of explains what happened, why she blocked all those memories. They never specifically explained it, but my interpretation that because of the trauma of losing her lover, that kind of caused her to block the memories of her, so she didn't want to feel the pain again, so that's why she blocked her out, and all the other hosts as well. And that's why it was so hard for her to reconnect with them, and there was that scene when she had to open that box with the gift that she gave him right before his death, and she couldn't do it. She couldn't open the box until when she did, she remembered what happened exactly, and she could kind of confront her trauma and unblock her memories and reconnect with all those hosts. And then they had that scene of all the previous hosts appearing all around her and becoming part of her, and I thought that was a great moment when everything kind of came together, and so you understood exactly, and then you see that lover character as well, and it was kind of bittersweet because you can see that she's crying because she knows, that person is dead, but that person will also is part of her now, and so it's like that same kind of bittersweet ending like the ending with Data's daughter, and also a lot of similarities to the ending of The Inner Light when Picard sees his family, including his wife who died, all appear together around him and tell him that they will be part of him forever, and so it had that similar element, and so that's why it did manage to pull my emotional strings, and so that's why it worked for me. I really liked all those elements of this episode. And I even love that moment when Michael talks to that admiral who was one of the previous hosts, and she says, your transmission gave me hope and all of that, and they kind of picked like a cute old guy to play the admiral, and so that part worked as well, that was cute, and so that whole ending sequence I thought was a great scene, one of the best scenes I ever saw in not just this show but maybe all of Star Trek. So I mentioned some of the other movies which this episode reminded me of, and I started thinking, what does make movie scenes like that emotional? When does it work so well? Why does it work so well? And I think it works best when there is some kind of a combination between a sad ending and a good ending together, when there is something sad and tragic and something happy happening simultaneously, because this way you can kind of feel the emotions of both of them together, and that makes it more powerful. So a tragic ending is, some beloved character dies, or there's some kind of love story which gets broken, which gets unfulfilled, some kind of tragedy to a character. And a good ending is when the two lovers do come back together, or there's a happy ending, everything is okay. And each of them can be a good and powerful emotional scene, but those movies or shows which manage to do kind of a combination of it simultaneously, that makes it much more emotional, because you can feel both of those emotions together simultaneously. You are both sad and happy at the same time. And that's when it kind of becomes almost like a feedback loop of emotions, and that's when you get really emotional. And if there's really good music on top, it also can add a lot to it, if it's the right music at the exact right time, and if there's some beautiful visuals, and if it was set up properly, then it can become something amazing. And I do think all of those scenes I talked about do work in that case, for me at least, mostly because of that combination of emotions. And so we're feeling sadness because she lost her lover, she has a trauma from it, she's feeling sorrow, she's crying, we see her crying, and then she sees that her lover is not really dead. Basically, she became part of her through the Trill symbiote, and she kind of gets reunited with her in the end, but not really. And so we have that kind of combination of good and bad emotions together, and that's why I think it makes it even more emotional. That's why it works so well, and we have plenty of examples like that in a lot of movies and shows. And so I mentioned the movie Ghost, in which also it's kind of a bittersweet ending, because on the one hand it's a sad ending because she has to say goodbye to her lover for many years presumably, so it's a sad scene. At the same time he goes into heaven, so that's a good thing, and we see all these other spirits in heaven accepting him. And so it's like good and bad together. It's sadness and happiness combined together into one scene, with great music on top, with great visuals, and so that's why it's emotional. And good music is also necessary. I think there's a video on YouTube, someone took the ending of the movie E.T. and simply removed the music and simply showed the scene as it would sound like in reality, and then it's not nearly as emotional without the music. So having some good music on top is also necessary. That's also what makes TV shows and movies better than just reading a book, because a book, as great as it could be, it can never have that extra spicing on top. It does not have the great visuals and the great music on top of a scene, and so it will never be as emotional as a good movie or show can be. So having great music is absolutely necessary as well. And speaking of E.T., it also was a bittersweet ending, so he has to say goodbye to his good friend, but he's going home, which is what he wanted. And so it's both good and bad together in one scene, and that's what makes it so emotional. You are both happy and sad at the same time. And I'm sure there are plenty of other examples, all kinds of love story in which one of the partners gets killed, and then they do still have a baby together or something. There's countless examples of that, like in Forrest Gump. He lost the love of his life, and yet he has the child from her, and so something of their love still remains, still lives, and so it wasn't all for nothing. And so it's that bittersweetness, that good and bad together, is what makes it so powerful, because it's like so much emotions in one moment. That's why it works. And not everyone will agree, not everyone has the same taste as I do, I guess, but I really liked all the scenes I just talked about. But the rest of the episode did have a lot of other problems, and I will talk about all of them in a separate video in part 3 of my review, which will probably be very long because I have a lot of notes to go over. So that's it for now. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it in the comment section below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.